My dad said to my 9-year-old son, "We voted. You won't be in the family photo." Those were the cruel words my dad said to my 9-year-old son. I used to believe family was everything. I thought that no matter what happened, the family would always stand by each other. But that Sunday afternoon, when my dad denied his own grandson right in front of him, my faith shattered. 9 years they'd been silently doubting, then they chose the cruelest way to say it. They didn't know I'd had proof since before the kid was born. And 5 years later, when they got on their knees begging to see their grandson, I said just one thing. What I said shocked them. Before I get into the details of this story, thank you for choosing to listen today, among thousands of stories on this social platform. Hello everyone, I'm Garrett, 34 years old. This happened at a family dinner I'll never forget. Every last Sunday of the month, I'd take Wesley to his grandparents' house in suburban Ridgewood, about a 20-minute drive from our apartment on County Road 12. Every time the car turned onto that familiar road, the kid would perk up in his seat, eyes bright. Grandma and Grandpa's house was better to him than Disneyland. Wesley loved sitting next to Grandma, listening to her stories from the old days, and especially the mashed potatoes with gravy she'd make just for him. That day was the Sunday after my dad's 60th birthday party, Lloyd Holloway. When we walked into the house, Wesley ran straight to the kitchen, looking for Grandma like always. I walked more slowly, stopping to greet my brother Conrad and his wife, who were sitting in the living room. Tessa, my sister, nodded coldly from the corner of the sofa, still scrolling on her phone. Everything went normally until the whole family sat down at the dinner table. Wesley was scooping up mashed potatoes when he suddenly looked up, eyes fixed on the living room wall. He put down his spoon, his unmistakable voice cutting through the clinking of silverware, asking loudly, "Grandpa, why am I in the new picture?" When I heard him ask, I looked up, and my heart dropped to the deepest level of hell. The new family photo, framed in fancy oak wood, hangs right in the center of the living room wall. I counted each person. Mom and Dad sitting in the middle, Conrad with his wife and 2 kids on the left, Tessa and her husband on the right. I was standing next to Conrad, arms crossed. But the space in front of me, where Wesley had stood when we took the photo, now just showed the wooden background and chair legs. Someone had cut my son out of the picture, neat and cold, as if he'd never existed. The whole dinner table fell silent. The silverware stopped clinking. Tessa stared down at her plate. Conrad cleared his throat and reached for the water pitcher. My mom stared at her salad, as if she were counting every tomato slice. My dad slowly put his wine glass down on the table, glanced at me, then looked straight into Wesley's eyes and said, "We voted. You won't be in the Holloway family photo." In that moment I went numb. Wesley blinked repeatedly. His mouth still had mashed potatoes in it. He didn't understand what was happening. Asking again, voice getting smaller, "Grandpa, what are you saying? Am I not your grandson?" My dad didn't soften in the least toward his grandson's innocent question. He kept looking straight at Wesley, each word clear. "This photo represents the Holloway bloodline, and nobody here is sure you carry our blood." Wesley turned to me, eyes starting to well up. His bottom lip was trembling. He grabbed my hand and asked, "Dad, what does he mean I'm not family? Did I do something wrong?" Looking down at the small hand gripping my sleeve, then up at my dad's face, still cold without a hint of regret, rage exploded from deep in my chest. I shot up, the chair flying back and crashing to the floor. I pointed straight at Dad's face and yelled, "What the hell are you saying? What kind of grandfather talks to his own grandson like that?" Everyone at the table jumped. Conrad's wife pulled their 2 kids away from the table. Wesley shrank back, face pale with fear. But my dad stayed seated, looking up at me with unwavering eyes and replied, "Grandson, am I wrong? Look at him. Look closely at the kid. 3 generations of Holloways have all been blonde-haired, blue-eyed, with white skin that turns red like a lobster in the sun. And this kid? Curly black hair, dark skin, amber eyes. Look at his nose, look at his chin. Is there anything that looks like you? Is there anything that looks like anyone in this room?" He paused, pointing toward Conrad's 2 kids being pulled out of the room, and continued, "Look at Jackson and Emma there. That's Holloway blood. But you're Wesley? I've kept quiet for 9 years, but today I'm saying it straight. He doesn't look like you. He doesn't look like anyone in this house. And that woman dumped him and disappeared without a word. You think that's a coincidence? You got played and you don't even know it, Garrett. This whole town of Ridgewood whispers about it, only you're blind. I turned to look at Mom, waiting for her to say something. She put down her fork, looked at her husband and said quietly, "Come on, Lloyd, not in front of the children, that's all." She didn't say Wesley was her grandson, didn't say Dad was wrong, just not in front of the children. Like, the only problem was saying these things in front of the kid, not the words themselves. I turned to Conrad and asked straight to his face, "What about you? You think that too?" My brother still looked away, twisting his water glass and mumbling, "I don't want to get involved in this." Tessa just crossed her arms, her lips slightly curled. She didn't say anything, but those eyes said it all. I looked around the table. Not one person spoke up to defend the 9-year-old trembling next to me. I couldn't take it anymore. I bent down, took Wesley's hand, and said, "Let's go, son. We're getting out of here." Wesley gripped my hand tightly, tears streaming down his cheeks. He looked up and asked me, "Dad, why do Grandma and Grandpa hate me?" That question felt like someone just punched me in the chest. I didn't know how to answer him. I just pulled him up and hugged him tight. Before walking out the door, I turned back and looked straight at Dad's face. "You want to vote? Fine. I know how to vote too. From now on, don't ever call me again." Then I carried my son out of that house. I heard Mom calling after us from behind, but I didn't look back. On the drive home, Wesley sat hunched in the back seat, his shoulders shaking in waves. I pulled over on the side of the road, right in front of the 7-Eleven on Oak Street, then climbed into the back seat to hold him. Wesley buried his face in my chest, voice choked as he asked, "Dad, why don't I look like Grandma and Grandpa? Why did Mom leave me?" I couldn't answer. I just held him tight, letting my tears fall onto his curly brown hair. Curly brown hair just like his mother's. Along with those amber eyes and easily tanned dark skin. Wesley inherited everything from her. And that was the source of 9 years of doubt from my family. 10 years ago, I met Shelby at Rusty Nail's bar. I was 24, had just dropped out of community college, and was working as an apprentice at Dad's auto shop. Life was so dull I could predict what I'd be doing for the next 10 years. Fixing cars, drinking beer, watching football on weekends, then repeating it all. Then she walked in, and everything changed. Shelby sat alone at the corner of the bar, drinking whiskey straight, no ice. She didn't smile at anyone, didn't talk to anyone, just sat there like the whole world didn't exist. The kind of woman who makes men want to approach her but scares them from getting rejected. But that night, she looked at me first. And when she smiled, I knew I was done for. She told me she came from Columbus and wanted to start over. I didn't ask why. She didn't explain either. The first time I brought Shelby home to meet my parents, I knew right away they didn't like her. My mom politely invited her in, but her eyes swept Shelby from head to toe, as if she were inspecting merchandise. My dad asked straight up, "Where are you from? What does your family do? Why move to a boring town like Ridgewood?" Shelby just smiled and answered, "I wanted a quieter life." Dad didn't ask more, but after she left, he pulled me out to the yard and said straight, "I don't like this girl. She's hiding something. What decent girl moves alone to a strange town? No family, no friends." I didn't listen. 24 years old, in love, who listens to their parents? For months later, Shelby told me she was pregnant. I got down on my knees and proposed right there in our rental apartment. With a silver ring I rushed to buy from the pawn shop on Main Street. She looked at the ring, then at me, shook her head, and said, "I don't need a husband, Garrett, but I'll stay and have the baby." I didn't understand what that meant then. Now I do. Wesley was born on a February night, snow falling thick outside the windows of St. Mary's Hospital. My mom came to visit, picked up her grandson, looked at him for a while, then put him down. She didn't say anything, but I saw her eyes look over at Shelby lying tired on the bed, then back at the kid. 3 days later, the hospital discharged us. I brought Wesley home to the apartment, and Shelby came along, but she was silent the whole car ride. The first night home, she nursed the baby, put him in the crib, then lay down on the bed facing the wall. The next morning, I woke up to Wesley crying. When I turned over, Shelby's side of the bed was stone cold. The closet was empty. The dresser was clean. Just a folded piece of paper on the pillow, hurried slanted handwriting. I wasn't born to be a mother. Don't look for me. When I called to tell my parents, the first thing Dad said was, "I told you so." Not one word of comfort. Didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't ask if the kid was all right. And from that point on, doubt began to grow in my family. After holding my son and whispering words of comfort that I didn't even know were valid, I laid Wesley down in the back seat, covered him with my jacket, then got back in the driver's seat and continued driving home. The whole ride, my mind wouldn't stop spinning. For 9 years they still held Wesley, still gave him candy, still made mashed potatoes for him. But they'd been doubting my son for 9 years? Why didn't they tell me straight up from the beginning? Why did they wait until today in front of the kid? To deny him? I would have preferred they reject him from the start. At least then, Wesley would have been too young to remember. The wound would have been mine alone. But there was something they didn't know. I'd had what they were demanding for a very long time. And that was also the secret I regretted most in my life. That night, I lay next to Wesley until he fell asleep peacefully. His face was still wet with tears, lips moving softly in his dreams. I pulled the blanket up to his chest, then quietly got up and left the room. The apartment was eerily silent. I opened the fridge, grabbed a beer, sat down on the sofa, but didn't drink it. My hand just kept spinning the can, my mind reeling from what had just happened. Then somehow my feet led me to the closet. In the bottom drawer, behind a pile of old sweaters, was a yellowed envelope I hadn't touched in 9 years. I sat down on the floor and pulled out the paper. LabCorp Lab logo in the corner, bold printed line, probability of paternity, 99.98%. 9 years ago, I already knew Wesley was my biological son. Back then, Shelby was 6 months pregnant. I remember that night like it was yesterday. Both of us lying in bed, me putting my hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick. Everything should have been perfect. But then I opened my mouth and asked a question that for 9 years I wished I could swallow back. "Babe, I want us to get a DNA test." Shelby didn't say anything. She slowly sat up and turned her back to me. After a long while, she turned back around, eyes red, and asked me, "You don't trust me?" I explained that I did trust her but needed to be sure that my family would ask questions, so that no one could say anything later. She listened, nodded, and agreed. But the way she looked at me from that night on was never the same. Not angry, not blaming, just tired. The kind of tired from someone who had to prove they weren't a liar. The results came back. I remember being happy for exactly 3 seconds. Then I looked over at Shelby, saw her sitting by the window, looking out at the rain, not asking about the results. She didn't need to ask. She knew from the beginning. 3 months later, Wesley was born. Then she left. For 9 years, I've asked myself one question. Did that piece of paper drive her away? I don't have an answer, and I probably never will. I hid the test results because I didn't want anyone to know I'd once doubted. I wanted to love my son because he was my son, not because of a number on a piece of paper. I thought I'd take this secret to my grave. But that dinner changed everything. In the weeks after that fateful dinner, Wesley wasn't the Wesley I knew anymore. He talked less. He stopped asking when we'd visit Grandma and Grandpa. He'd stand in front of the mirror, staring at himself for long periods, touching his hair, his chin, his nose. One morning, I walked past the bathroom and saw him pulling hard at his hair with a wet comb, face scrunched up in pain. I stopped and asked what he was doing. Wesley looked at me through the mirror, eyes red, and answered, "I want straight hair like you, Dad." I didn't know what to say. I just walked in, took the comb from his hand, then hugged him tight. We sat there on the bathroom floor, neither of us saying anything. Then one night, I walked past his room and heard whispering from inside. I stopped, pressed my ear to the door. "You have to try harder to be like him. You have to promise. You'll try." My 9-year-old was promising himself he'd change to get Grandpa's acceptance. He thought it was his fault. He felt that if he were different, Grandma and Grandpa would love him. I collapsed outside his door, back against the wall. Tears streamed down my face, throat choking up. Enough. The following week, I called my parents, told them I'd come over the following Sunday. Alone. Had something to say. Before leaving, I dropped Wesley off with Mike. a coworker at the auto shop, and asked him to watch my son for a few hours. The kid asked where I was going, and I just said Dad had some business to take care of. He didn't ask more. For the past 2 months, Wesley had gotten used to not asking more. 60 days. They called during the first few weeks. Dad called once, his voice clipped through the phone. Garrett, come home now. I hung up. Mom called 3 times, crying each time, and I let it go to voicemail. Tessa didn't call. Conrad texted exactly 1 line. Just calm down. I didn't reply. Then they stopped reaching out. Maybe they thought that if they let time pass, everything would blow over, as it had before, like I'd swallow it down and come back. The yellowed envelope sat on the passenger seat for the entire 20-minute drive back. When I parked in front of the house, my mind was blank. Through the dining room window, I could see the whole family sitting around the table. Warm yellow light, laughter echoing outside. Like nothing had happened 2 months ago. I pushed the door open and walked in. Conrad was telling some story about work, gesturing in the air. Tessa sat next to her husband, nodding along. My mom was bringing a salad from the kitchen. Dad sat at the head of the table, cutting his beef. Everything stopped when they saw me. My dad put down his knife and looked me up and down. He didn't stand up, didn't say hello. He just leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, then looked straight at me and said, "So you're here. Sit down." I didn't sit. I stood there, holding the envelope. Dad looked at the envelope, then at me. He sighed, eyes still looking straight at me when he continued. "Garrett, I'll tell you straight. I've been thinking for 2 months. If you're here today to tell me Wesley is adopted, that you adopted him, I'll accept that. I'll treat him like family, love him properly." He paused, cold, sharp eyes boring into me as he said the following line. "But if you're here to argue, to make me apologize for telling the truth, then don't waste your time. I won't apologize for saying what I believe is right." The whole table fell silent. My mom stood by the stove, looking at me with worried eyes. Conrad looked down at his plate. Tessa glanced at me, waiting. I swallowed. 2 months of preparing for this moment, but Dad's words still left me speechless for a few seconds. He was ready to accept Wesley as an adopted grandson, but didn't believe he was blood. I walked to the dining table, placed the envelope down among the plates of food, then looked straight into Dad's eyes and said, "Open it." Dad looked at the envelope, looked at me, then slowly pulled out the paper inside. I saw his eyes scan each line, saw his jaw tighten, saw his hands slightly shake. Conrad craned his neck to look, turned to Dad, and asked, "What is it, Dad?" My dad didn't answer. He just sat there, eyes glued to the paper. I looked at the whole table and said, my voice echoing through the room, "DNA test. 99.98% probability of paternity. Wesley is my biological son." Tessa reached over and grabbed the paper from Dad's hand, her eyes racing through each line. She looked up, stared straight at me, and asked, "Where did you do this?" "When?" I looked back at her and answered, 9 years ago, when Shelby was 6 months pregnant. Silence. The wall clocks ticking rang out crystal clear. My mom set the salad bowl down on the table. She looked at me with red eyes and asked, "You've known for 9 years?" I nodded and answered, "I knew before Wesley was even born. I knew before Dad looked into that kid's eyes and said he didn't belong to this family." My dad still sat silent, eyes looking down at the table. After a while, he looked up, stared at me, and asked, "So why didn't you say anything from the beginning? 9 years. Why did you hide it?" I looked straight into his eyes and replied, "Because I wanted to love my son without needing a piece of paper to prove it. And you all used to love that kid the same way." I paused, looked at each face around the table, then continued, "But I was wrong. Dad just said he'd accept Wesley if he were adopted. Do you know how insane that is?" My dad fell silent, his hands gripping the edge of the table. My mom started crying. She stepped toward me and said, "Garrett, I'm sorry. I didn't know." I stepped back, looked at her, and asked, "You didn't know what? Didn't you know Wesley was your blood grandson? Or you didn't know how to speak up and defend him when Dad said those things in front of him?" My mom stood frozen, tears streaming down, and couldn't say anything. My dad stood up, his voice softening when he said to me, "Garrett, sit down. Dad was wrong. Let me see Wesley. I'll apologize to him." I shook my head and cut him off. "No, You already said it. In front of everyone. In front of him. I stepped forward, looked straight into Dad's eyes, and continued. You know what he's been doing since that night? He pulls his hair every day because he wants straight hair like mine. He stands in front of the mirror, asking himself why he doesn't look like anyone. He whispers to himself in his room that he'll try harder to be like Grandpa. The kid thinks it's his fault. Thinks that if he changes, you and Mom will love him. And that's on you. My dad stood silent for the first time. I saw him speechless. Then he whipped around to Tessa, eyes blazing, pointing straight at her face and roared. You're the one who's been whispering in my ear all along. You said everyone thought that. You suggested cutting the kid out of the photo. Tessa went pale. She shot up, pointed back at Dad, and yelled, I just said what everyone was thinking. You thought it too. Don't dump it all on me. My dad slammed his hand on the table, plates rattling. He looked at Tessa and roared. I thought that because you kept blowing it in my ear. You're jealous and bitter because you don't have kids. So you wanted to drag my grandson down. Tessa laughed bitterly. She looked at Dad and shot back. Your grandson? 2 minutes ago. You said you'd only accept him if he were adopted. Now you're blaming me? Conrad stood up, raised both hands, looked at them and said, Everyone, just calm down. Dad turned to Conrad, pointed straight at his face and yelled, And you sat there silent as stone. Didn't say one word to defend your nephew. You're no better. My mom broke into sobs. She held her head and screamed. Stop it. Everyone, stop. The whole room was in chaos. I stood there, watching my family tear each other apart in front of me. 9 years of silent doubt. Now they were turning on each other to find someone to blame. I stepped forward, took the paper back from Tessa's hand, folded it, and put it in my pocket. Dad turned to me, his voice softening, and he looked at me and begged, Garrett, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Give me a chance to make it right. I looked at him and shook my head, replied, You're sorry because you saw the paper, not because you realized you were wrong. An apology that only comes after proof doesn't mean anything. Just as I was about to leave, my mom stood up, grabbed my hand, tears flowing freely, and begged, Garrett, let me see Wesley. I'll apologize to him. I'm begging you. I pulled my hand away, looked at her and said, You all chose to cut Wesley out of the family photo. Now I'm choosing to cut you all out of his life. From now on, don't call. Don't come over. Don't hope to see your grandson. After I finished speaking, I left without looking back. That night, after picking up Wesley and putting him to bed, I sat alone in the living room, looking at the bare wall. The Holloway family had their photo hanging proudly in the center of their house. What about my family? Over the weekend, I asked Mike to come to the apartment and take a photo of my son and me. Wesley wore a blue dress shirt. I put my arm around his shoulder. We both smiled brightly. Didn't need anyone else. I took the photo to Walmart, spent $20 getting it framed, then hung it right in the center of the living room, the best spot, where anyone walking in would see it. That evening, I opened my laptop and started writing. I told everything. The Holloway family photo from which Wesley was cut out. The words his grandfather said to him in front of everyone. The look in my 9-year-old's eyes when his own family rejected him. And the new photo of father and son hangs in the center of our small apartment's living room. Then I hit post on Facebook where I had 300 friends, most of them from Ridgewood. After hitting post, I closed the laptop and went into the bedroom. Wesley was curled up on my bed, face peaceful in sleep. I lay down next to him, pulled the blanket up over his shoulders, then whispered in his ear. From now on, our family is just 2 people. Dad and you. And you're perfect exactly as you are. They're the ones with problems. Wesley couldn't hear me, but I needed to say it for myself. The next morning, my phone exploded. Over 60 notifications, messages, missed calls, comments. In Ridgewood, rumors spread faster than wildfire in dry season. Mike texted early in the morning. You've really lost it, Garrett. The whole town is sharing your post. Mrs. Thompson, my parents' old neighbor, called and told me with a voice full of sympathy, Garrett, I just read your post. I can't believe Lloyd would do that to the boy. You and Wesley need anything, call me. 30 shares. In a big city, nobody would care. But in this town of 8,000 people, 30 shares meant almost everyone knew the Holloway family business. In the weeks after that, I didn't need to ask to know what was happening to my family. People called to tell me. Mike called one evening, his voice a bit awkward. "Hey Garrett, some regular customers stopped by my shop today asking about you. They said they won't be going to your old man's shop anymore. You know how it is around here, people pick sides fast." A few days later, Miss Margie, my mom's friend, called to tell me, "Garrett, I just heard what happened at church. Your sister got asked point blank about the photo thing by some ladies in the women's group. She cried and left in the middle of the meeting. Then Mr. Martinez, who owned the gas station at the head of County Road 12, also texted me, 'Garrett, I noticed your old man's shop has been dead empty for weeks now. Someone even took down his shop's flyer from the community bulletin board.' I wasn't happy about those things, but I wasn't sad either. A week after the post, my family tried to reach out, but I chose to block them all. The following month, I decided to move away, not because I was scared, but because I wanted Wesley to grow up somewhere nobody knew our story, where nobody looked at him with pitying eyes, where nobody whispered behind his back about the boy his grandfather rejected. I got a job at an auto shop in Millbrook, 40 minutes drive from Ridgewood, lower pay. Longer commute, but it was a fresh start for father and son. The new apartment was smaller, but it was enough for Wesley and me. The photo of father and son still hung in the center of the living room, as proudly as I loved my son. I thought everything would end there. Everyone goes their own way. I had my life, they had theirs. But life isn't that simple. You reap what you sow. 5 years later, my doorbell rang. 5 years passed faster than I thought they would. The first year, Wesley still asked me every Christmas, "Dad, did Grandma and Grandpa send me a present?" I didn't know what to say, so I just held him close. The second year, one night he couldn't sleep, climbed into my bed, and asked, "Why do Grandma and Grandpa hate me? Is it because I'm ugly?" That night, I told him everything. About his mom. About the DNA test. About why we left Ridgewood. Wesley listened, was quiet for a long time, then said, "So it's their fault, not mine." From that night on, he never asked about his grandparents again. In the years that followed, our lives gradually stabilized. Wesley made new friends, joined the school basketball team, and grew tall quickly. Once sitting in the stands watching him play, another dad asked me, "Your son's amazing. Does he look more like his mom or dad?" I smiled and answered, "Looks like his mom, but his personality is like mine." For the first time, I talked about Shelby without feeling pain. Now Wesley's 14, half a head taller than me, still has curly brown hair and amber eyes. But he stopped trying to straighten his hair long ago. He even keeps it longer now, ties it in a small bun in the back. He told me, "My hair looks good this way, why should I change it?" And me? I got promoted to manager at the auto shop in Millbrook. Better pay, more regular hours. I bought a new car. The apartment's still small, but it's enough for father and son. The photo taken when Wesley was 9 still hangs in the center of the living room. The Walmart frame is bent at the corners, but I won't replace it. It's a memory. News about the Holloway family still reached me occasionally through Mike or a few old acquaintances. Conrad got divorced. His wife took Jackson and Emma back to her parents' place in Pennsylvania, a 5-hour drive from Ridgewood. I heard he only gets to see his kids a few times a year. Tessa also got divorced. Her husband cheated with a coworker. But that wasn't the most shocking news. After the divorce, Tessa went for tests and found out she was permanently infertile. The woman who used to envy me for having a child would never have children. I wasn't happy about that, but I wasn't sad either. And like that, Wesley became the only remaining grandson of the Holloway bloodline. The grandson they once cut out of the family photo. Sunday afternoon at the end of November, the weather was getting cold. I was sitting, watching football on TV, while Wesley was doing homework at the dining table. The doorbell rang. What I didn't want finally came looking for me. I got up to open the door and froze. My parents stood there. 5 years without seeing them, and they'd aged noticeably. My dad was more hunched than before, hair almost completely gray, skin wrinkled. My mom had lost a lot of weight, her eyes sunken deep, her hands shaking as she gripped her husband's hand. My dad looked at me, his voice trembling as he said, "Garrett, let us see our grandson. Just once. He's our only grandson now." My mom started crying. She grabbed my hand and begged. "I know I was wrong, but I'm old now. I don't know how much longer I have left. Just let me see my grandson once. My dad bowed his head. For the first time in my life, I saw him bow his head in front of me. He looked down at the ground and said, voice choking, I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you. I stood there, looking at the two older adults in front of me. 5 years ago, they looked into their grandson's eyes and told him he didn't belong to the family. Now they stood here, begging to see him. I turned inside and called, Wesley, come here, son. Wesley got up, walked to the door. He looked at his grandparents, face expressionless. Not happy, not angry, just empty. My mom choked up. She reached toward Wesley and called, Wesley, you've grown so big. Wesley looked at them for a long time, then turned to look at me and asked, do you want me to see them, Dad? I shook my head. Wesley nodded, turned back to look at his grandparents, and said, then I don't want to either. Then he turned his back and went inside without looking back. My dad collapsed as someone had just drained all his strength. He looked at me, eyes bloodshot, pleading, but I only said one thing. I looked straight into Dad's eyes and said, we already voted. My dad stepped back as if someone had just slapped him in the face. He looked at me, mouth moving but no sound coming out. I continued, voice calm, you're right. Voting is the Holloway family way. We voted. 2 people. Unanimous. You can't come into our lives anymore. Without waiting for a response, I closed the door. Mom's crying echoed through the thin wooden door, then got quieter, farther away. Heavy footsteps in the hallway. Then the sound of the elevator closing. I stood with my back against the door until I couldn't hear anything anymore. Going back to the living room, Wesley was sitting on the sofa. His face was calm, but his hands shook slightly as he held his glass of water. I sat down next to him. Father and son were quiet for a while. Wesley put his glass down on the table, turned to look at me and asked, do you regret it, Dad? I sighed and answered honestly, I don't know. Wesley nodded, his eyes looking out the window. Started to rain, drops of water running down the glass. I looked at him and said, there are wounds that can't be forgiven, Wesley. But not forgiving is also another kind of wound. Wesley turned back to look at me and asked, so why do we have to choose pain, Dad? I didn't have an answer. I just sat there, looking at my son, looking at his curly brown hair, amber eyes, the face that was starting to show the features of a man. Wesley was quiet for a while, then turned to say to me, his voice deeper than before, Dad, if I have kids someday, I'll never vote on whose family. Family isn't something you vote on. Hearing him say that, my chest tightened. I patted his shoulder and said, come here and give me a hug. Wesley pulled me close, and father and son hugged each other to the sound of rain falling outside the window. And for me, that was enough. My story ends here. If there's one thing I want to leave you with through the story, it's this. Family isn't determined by eye color, hair color, or skin tone. Family is the people who choose to stay by your side, no matter what happens. They voted to cut my son out of the family photo. I voted to cut them out of our lives. Who was more cruel? Did I go too far? Or was that just the way a father protects his child? Before closing, I want to ask you, if you were in my situation, what would you do? Please leave a comment below and let me know what you think. If you loved the story, don't forget to hit like and share so more people can listen. Thanks for being here with us today. I look forward to seeing you in the following stories. What would you do if your parents told everyone your wife cheated, and your 10-year-old son was born after your wife's affair? My parents said exactly that at our Christmas party, right in front of 30 guests. Let me tell you this story. I'm going to show you how my parents dug their own grave and buried themselves in it. Before I get into the details, I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for taking the time to follow this story. Hello everyone. I'm Brian, 42 years old. Currently, I live with my wife, Anna, and our 2 children, Harper and Daniel. We live in a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. I repurchased this house in 2012. Looking at my life now, people might think I have a happy family. And that happiness is true for my immediate family. However, when it comes to my extended family, the people who brought me into this world, the relationship between them and me is no longer good. 2 years ago, something heartbreaking happened. My own parents did something unforgivable to my son and my wife right at our Christmas party in front of almost 30 guests. After that Christmas night, I had to make the most painful decision of my life. I had to make my own parents face the consequences for what they did. In Christmas 2023, I had no intention of bringing my family to the party. At that time, we just moved back to Ohio in August after 5 years living in Texas. The reason we came back wasn't pleasant at all. The company where I worked as CEO went bankrupt. I lost my job. After a few months of searching for new opportunities in Texas with no results, I decided to bring my family back to Ohio, where I had more connections and better chances. Our house was only 15 miles from my parents' place. Close enough for them to visit anytime, but in the 4 months since we'd been back, they hadn't set foot in our house once, and I hadn't visited them either because the emotional distance between my parents and me was way more than 15 miles. A few days before Christmas 2023, I was sitting in the living room when my phone buzzed with a call from Owen, my brother. Owen contacted me and convinced me to bring my little family to the Christmas party. After consulting with my wife, she agreed, and I decided to bring the kids to the party. On Christmas Day, we arrived at my parents' house around 5 p.m. When the 4 of us walked into the house, our relatives smiled and greeted us cheerfully. Some hugged me, asking how the new job was going. Some complimented Harper on how much she'd grown, how beautiful she was. Some patted Daniel's head, saying the boy had gotten so tall. But I noticed something wasn't right. Their eyes swept over Daniel with something indescribable. Some people exchanged glances when they looked at the boy. The smiles seemed forced. The greetings felt more social than warm. After exchanging a few greetings, Anna took the 2 kids to the buffet table to get food. I stayed near the corner of the room watching, and that's when I heard the relatives talking trash. Marcus, my cousin, was standing a few steps away from me. He was saying to another relative, "Look at Daniel there, he doesn't look anything like Brian. I told you his wife definitely cheated." Hearing those words, I walked over and tapped Marcus on the shoulder. He turned around, his face going pale when he saw me standing right behind him. I looked straight into his eyes, my voice tight as I asked, "What did you just say? Repeat it." Marcus stammered, his lips moving but no words coming out. The 2 people standing next to him slowly drifted away. The air around us got thick. When the tension was building, Anna appeared out of nowhere, grabbing my arm. She pulled me away gently, her voice whispering but urgent. "Let them be. Don't make a scene. For the kids." I looked at my wife, looked at her pleading eyes. I took a deep breath, trying to swallow my anger, but in my heart, an indescribable uneasiness was rising. After calming down, I took Anna's hand and led her and our 2 kids toward the main living room, where my parents were sitting. After all, we came here to see them. I told myself to try to get through this evening. Seeing them, I spoke up, "Dad, Mom." After I greeted them, Dad just nodded slightly, didn't stand up. His eyes swept over me, swept over Anna, then stopped at Daniel. His face briefly scrunched up, like he was seeing something unpleasant. Mom smiled at Harper. She stood up, reaching out to hug the girl, her voice sweet. "Harper, my dear granddaughter, you've grown so much, so beautiful." But when Daniel stepped forward, Mom just patted the boy's head casually, then turned away immediately. She didn't even look into his eyes. After witnessing their coldness, I stood there, feeling my chest tighten. Without thinking, I turned to Anna and told her, "Let's go. This place doesn't welcome us." Right then, Owen appeared. My brother hurried over, putting his hand on my shoulder as if to keep me there. Then he turned to my parents, his voice somewhat reproachful. "Dad, Mom, what are you doing? It's been 5 years since Brian came back. You should be happy, shouldn't you?" Dad looked at Owen, then looked at me, silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke up. "Since you're back, find a seat. The party will start in a bit." I wanted to turn around and leave immediately, but Owen gripped my shoulder tight, his eyes pleading. Anna also looked at me, nodding gently. Finally, I sat down. For Owen. For Anna. Because I didn't want to ruin the evening for the kids. Around 6 p.m., the party began. Everyone ate, drank, and chatted. I tried to blend in, answering relatives' small talk questions. Then came the part about giving gifts to the children. After my parents announced the gift section, the kids started cheering excitedly. Harper stepped up first, receiving a large gift box from Grandma's hands. When she opened it, the girl's eyes lit up, a brand new tablet. Mom smiled, hugged Harper and said, "I love you. Study hard, okay?" Harper thanked Grandma, then returned to her seat with the gift in her hands. Daniel's turn. Without waiting to be called, the boy stepped up, his eyes sparkling with anticipation. He stood before his grandparents, an innocent smile on his lips. Dad looked at Daniel. Then he spoke up, saying to my son, "Children born from their mother's affair don't get gifts. You're not my family." The entire room went dead silent. Daniel stood there like he'd been nailed to the floor. The boy's eyes widened as he didn't understand what was happening. The smile on his lips slowly faded. Then those eyes began to well up with tears. Seeing my son treated so cruelly, I shot up from my seat. I roared at Dad, my voice echoing through the room. "What did you just say?" Mom jumped in, her voice sharp as a knife. "We're just telling the truth. Look at that boy. Does he look anything like you? Everyone can see it." Unable to control myself anymore, I yelled, "Anna is my wife. She would never do that. How dare you say that about my wife?" Dad stood up from his armchair, facing me, his voice full of contempt. "Then go get a DNA test. Since the boy was born, he hasn't looked anything like you. Relatives have been talking behind your back for 10 years. Do you know how ashamed we are? Do you know how much gossip we've had to hear?" Seeing the tension, Owen stepped between us. My brother put his hands out, trying to separate Dad and me. He yelled at my parents, "Dad, Mom, stop it. What are you doing? This is Christmas." Dad turned to Owen and roared, "Shut up, Owen. This is his business. It's got nothing to do with you." Mom didn't stop. She stepped forward, pointing at Daniel, who was standing there shaking, her voice piercing. "This affair child doesn't deserve to carry our family name. We don't recognize him." Hearing what they said, Daniel burst into tears. The boy's small shoulders shook in waves. His crying tore my heart apart. Anna rushed over, hugging her son tight. Tears also rolled down her cheeks. She shielded Daniel with her whole body, like she was protecting him from a deadly danger. While we were still arguing, suddenly Harper stood up. My daughter stepped forward, her walk full of determination. She stood blocking Daniel and Anna, like a small but strong shield. The 12-year-old looked straight into Grandma's eyes and yelled with all her strength, "Shut up! I hate you! You're not my grandmother!" The entire room seemed frozen after what Harper said. Mom stepped back, her face pale with shock. Dad tried to smooth things over, his voice suddenly softening. "Harper, what are you saying? Grandpa and Grandma love you. You're our dear granddaughter." Harper turned to look at my dad, her voice firm as she said to my father, "You too. You're not my grandfather. A real grandfather would never say those words to my little brother." That statement from Harper made Dad go silent, not daring to say another word. And then, while everyone was still stunned by what Harper said, Harper did something that left everyone in the room speechless. The girl walked over to my mom. She took out the tablet she'd just been given, the expensive gift any kid would dream of. Harper placed it down in front of Grandma, her voice full of contempt. "I don't need gifts from people like you. You can keep it." Mom went pale, couldn't say anything. She looked at the tablet, then at Harper, like she couldn't believe what was happening. After all those actions, Harper turned back to look at me, the girl's voice solid as a rock. "Dad, let's go. From now on, I don't want to set foot in this house again. They're not our family." In that moment, I looked at my daughter with pride mixed with pain. Harper was only 12 then, but she had done what I should have done 10 years ago. Harper had stood up to protect her little brother, protect her mother, protect our family. Without thinking twice, I stepped forward, taking my daughter's hand. Anna also stood up, taking Daniel's hand. The four of us walked toward the door. None of the people at the party dared to speak up and stop us. They stood there like statues, silently witnessing. Just as I opened the car door, I heard Owen's voice from inside the house. My brother was yelling at my parents. "Dad, Mom, what the hell are you doing? Are you insane?" Dad's voice rang out in response. "Shut up, Owen. You're my son. Don't yell at me. What I do is my right." I didn't stay to hear more. I closed the car door and started the engine. As I drove out of the driveway, I looked in the rearview mirror. Owen was walking out onto the porch with his wife and kid. They were leaving too. My brother had chosen a side, and he had decided to stand with me. The car glided through the night. The streets were empty, with only streetlights flickering on both sides. Anna sat in the back holding Daniel. The boy had stopped crying, but was still hiccuping. Harper sat next to Anna, one hand holding her brother's hand, the other rubbing his back. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were still red. I drove, eyes looking straight ahead, but my mind had drifted to the past. 10 years ago, to the day Daniel was born. In 2013, Daniel was born. I remember like it was yesterday the feeling of holding my son for the first time. I was so happy I wanted to cry. Anna lay in bed, exhausted but smiling. Harper was only 2 then, standing beside the bed, looking at her little brother with curious eyes. My parents came to visit the next day. I thought they'd be happy, but no. Mom looked at Daniel for a long time. Then she frowned, turned to ask me, "Why doesn't he look anything like you, Brian?" Harper looked exactly like you when she was born. Dad stood beside her, nodding in agreement. He muttered, "Yeah, weird. He doesn't have any features from our family." I didn't think much of it at the time. I just laughed, said maybe Daniel takes after my wife's side. Anna has different genetic traits. Not every kid looks like their dad. But that was just the beginning. In the years after that, every family gathering, I'd hear the whispers. At first, it was seemingly harmless jokes. "Oh, Daniel doesn't look anything like Brian, does he? Weird, Harper looks exactly like Dad. Though, you sure he's yours, Brian?" I'd laugh it off, thinking they were joking. However, the jokes became increasingly vicious. But what hurt me the most was my parents' attitude. They clearly treated Daniel differently. Harper got expensive gifts from Grandpa and Grandma every birthday and Christmas. Daniel got cheap stuff or sometimes nothing at all. Harper got taken to the park, movies, and ice cream by her grandparents. Daniel was left at home for various reasons. Anna knew everything. She heard the whispers. She saw how my parents treated Daniel. She knew everyone suspected she cheated, but she never fought back. Every time I wanted to get angry, she'd hold my hand, whispering, "Don't make a scene. They're your family. They'll understand eventually." I listened to my wife time after time. I swallowed my anger. I pretended not to hear the gossip. I hoped time would change everything. But 5 years passed, then 10 years passed. Nothing changed. Things only got worse. In 2018, I got an offer to be CEO of a tech company in Texas. The salary was 3 times my current job. Wide open promotion opportunities. It was a turning point in my career, but more importantly, it was a chance to get my family out of that toxic cycle. The 5 years in Texas were the most peaceful time for my family. Harper and Daniel grew up without having to hear insults. Anna could finally smile without worrying. I focused on my work and was quickly promoted. We were happy, really happy. But in early 2023, everything collapsed. And now, this Christmas night, everything I tried to run from for 5 years had exploded right in front of my children. A steel determination rose in me. This time would be different. They'd insulted my son and made an innocent 10-year-old cry. Called him an affair child in front of the whole extended family. There was no reason to hold back anymore. It was time for them to pay. When we got home, Anna coaxed Daniel to bed. The boy was exhausted and fell asleep almost immediately. Harper went into her room, but before closing the door, she turned back to look at me. Her eyes full of determination as she said, "Dad, I love you. I love Daniel. Don't let anyone talk badly about my brother anymore." Hearing what she said, I stepped forward and hugged my daughter tightly. My voice choked up, "I promise you, I'll protect our family." Harper nodded, then went into her room. When the whole house was asleep, I sat alone in my office. I opened old files, bank statements from years ago, emails, text messages. Over the years, I'd helped my parents a lot. Every time they had financial difficulties, I was always the one who stepped up to solve them. I added it all up. The number that came up made me gasp. Over $300,000. I screenshotted all the evidence, receipts. I saved them systematically. A total of approximately $215,000 had clear evidence. as indicated through texts and emails. The rest was cash or amounts without paperwork. I looked at the number $215,000. My hands shook, but not from fear, from rage. While I was still drowning in the numbers, soft footsteps sounded behind me. I turned around. Anna stood at the office door. She walked in, looked at the computer screen with the numbers and screenshots. She asked me, "What are you doing?" I sighed and replied, "Doing the math. Calculating how much money we've lent them over the years." Anna remained silent for a long time, staring at the numbers on the screen. Then she sat down next to me. A few seconds later, she spoke up, her voice trembling. "Brian, let's do a DNA test for Daniel." I turned to look at my wife, not believing my ears. I asked again, "What are you saying?" "I don't need to do that. I trust you." Anna shook her head and replied, "You don't need to, but I do." Hearing what my wife said, I gripped her hand tight, whispering to her, "Anna, I never doubt you. Not for a second. We've been together for 15 years. I know what kind of person you are. I don't need any paper to prove Daniel is my son." Anna broke down crying after what I said. Not the gentle crying from before, but sobbing, like she was breaking apart from inside. Almost a minute later, Anna lifted her head to look at me. Her eyes were red, but her gaze was determined. She said to me, "Brian, if you don't agree to do the DNA test, I'll divorce you." I was stunned hearing that. I was silent for a long time, looking at my wife, looking at her red eyes and determined expression. I understood this wasn't the time to argue. Anna had endured too much. She deserved to be freed from 10 years of humiliation. Finally, I nodded and replied, "Okay, we'll go tomorrow morning." Anna hugged me tight. I held my wife close, swearing I'd protect her and the kids at any cost. In my head, a clear plan had formed. The DNA test was just the first step. After that, I'd demand the money back. I'd get a restraining order to protect the kids. I'd do everything necessary to make my parents pay for what they'd done. The next morning, I decided to take both kids with us to the DNA testing place. When the car stopped in front of the testing center, Harper looked at the sign outside. Then she turned to look at me, her eyes cold. Harper's voice cut like a knife. "Do you doubt that Daniel isn't your son? Do you think Mom cheated?" My heart felt like it was being squeezed. My daughter thought I didn't trust my wife. Before I could explain, Anna spoke up. "Harper, I'm the one who asked Dad to do this." Harper was surprised. Eyes wide as she asked, "You? Why? What for?" I turned to look at my daughter, explaining, "To throw the results proving Mom didn't cheat right in your grandparents' faces, so they can never open their mouths to insult your mom and little brother again." Harper was silent for a moment. I saw her expression gradually change. The initial anger gave way to understanding. Then Harper lowered her head, her voice getting smaller. "I thought Dad didn't trust Mom. I'm sorry, Dad." I reached out to pat my daughter's head. Right after that, we walked into the testing room. The process was quick and straightforward. When we finished, the clinic staff informed us that the results would be ready in 3 days. After leaving the testing center, I took my family to another address, a lawyer's office that I'd researched the night before. We met the lawyer, a middle-aged man named Robert. He listened to me tell the whole story, from 10 years of whispers and gossip, to the Christmas night that just passed, to the over $300,000 I'd lent my parents. I took out my phone, opened the folder with all the screenshots to show him. Because the case involved children and psychological violence, Robert said he'd contact CPS, Child Protective Services. They'd come interview Harper and Daniel to assess the level of damage. About the money, Robert would draft an official demand notice for repayment. My parents would have 30 days to pay back the money. If they didn't pay, we'd take the case to court. When we left the lawyer's office, Anna gripped my hand tightly. She didn't say anything, but her eyes said it all. 3 days passed. When the email with the DNA test results arrived, Anna and I sat side to side in front of the computer screen. Her hand trembled as she clicked to open the file. The results appeared. I was Daniel's biological father. I looked at those results, not surprised. I'd never doubted, but now I had proof. That afternoon, my whole family drove to my parents' house. I rang the doorbell, waited. After a moment, Mom opened the door. She looked at the 4 of us standing on the porch. Her face immediately scrunched up, her voice cold as she asked, "What are you here for?" We don't welcome you. Dad appeared behind her. He looked at me with annoyed eyes, saying curtly, after what you did Christmas night, you still have the nerve to come here? I didn't answer, didn't argue. I just took an envelope out of my jacket pocket and handed it to Dad. I said, my voice strangely calm, read it yourself. Dad snatched the envelope and tore it open. The first thing he saw was the DNA test results with the hospital seal. Dad's eyes widened. Mom grabbed the paper and read it. She was silent for a long time, and something unexpected happened. Their faces suddenly brightened. Mom turned to look at Daniel, then reached out her hand, her voice sweet as if nothing before had ever happened. Daniel, my dear grandson. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Come here so I can hug you. Seeing Mom's sweetness, Daniel stepped back, hiding behind me. The boy gripped my shirt tight, saying nothing. His eyes were full of fear. Dad also stepped forward, his voice softening. Daniel, I'm sorry. I said things I shouldn't have said. Please forgive me. I put my hand out, stopping them. My voice was cold as ice. Don't come near my son. Seeing my firm attitude, Mom froze, looking at me, surprised and saying, Brian, the results already proved it. Daniel is our grandson. We're sorry. Sover, let it go. I laughed coldly and asked directly. Let it go? 10 years ago, you insulted my wife. For 10 years, you treated my son like garbage. And now, just because of one piece of paper, you think everything should be forgiven? My question made both my parents silent. Maybe they didn't know what to say to calm the anger in me. A few seconds later, I looked straight into Mom's eyes and continued. And there's more. It's not just the DNA test results. Dad frowned and asked, what else? I pointed to the envelope and replied, keep looking. Dad immediately searched through the envelope. He pulled out a stack of papers. It was the official demand notice for repayment of $215,000, with a 30-day deadline. After reading through the papers, Dad's face turned red. He threw the papers on the ground, roaring like a cornered animal. You dare demand money from me? Ungrateful brat. I raised you, fed you, educated you, and this is how you repay me? I didn't flinch. I looked straight into Dad's eyes and replied, you call that repaying? I've lent you over $300,000 over the past 15 years. I have proof for $215,000. You said you'd pay it back. You never did. That's borrowed money, not a gift. Mom yelled in support of Dad, you're our son. It's natural for a son to help his parents. I laughed coldly and replied, that's not all. CPS will conduct interviews with you, and they'll issue a restraining order against you too. From now on, you're not allowed near my children. Mom yelled again. CPS? You called Child Protective Services to investigate us? Are you insane? We're your children's grandparents. Dad stepped forward, fists clenched, his voice full of threats. You dare take family business outside? You dare humiliate us? Before I could answer, Mom suddenly turned to look at Anna. She screamed, this is all your fault. You've destroyed my family. You convinced Brian to turn against us. Then Mom lunged forward, raising her hand to slap Anna. I reacted faster. I stepped in front of my wife, grabbed Mom's wrist, and held it tight, my voice gritting each word. Enough. Please stop it. Before I lose my temper. Mom jerked her hand away, eyes glaring, yelling in my face. Go ahead and hit me then, ungrateful brat. I raised you to treat me like this? I gave birth to you, I have the right. I let go of her hand, stepped back, looked at the woman in front of me, the one who gave birth to me. In that moment, I didn't recognize her anymore. She wasn't my mother. She was just a strange, evil, hateful woman. I turned around, took Anna's and the kids' hands. We walked toward the car. Behind us, my parents' cursing still rang out. But I didn't turn back. That evening, while my family was eating dinner in silence, the doorbell rang. It was Owen, my brother. Owen came into the house, greeted Anna and the two kids. Then he sat down on the sofa in the living room, silent for a long time. I waited. Owen sighed, then spoke up. I heard from Mom and Dad. About the test results. About you demanding money. About CPS. Hearing what Owen said, I looked at him and said nothing. After a few seconds of thinking, Owen continued telling me. They're furious. Mom cried all afternoon. Dad smashed stuff around the house. They're saying you're an ungrateful son, betraying the family. Hearing more of this, I stayed silent and waited. I wanted to know why Owen came to my house. After almost another minute of silence, Owen stood up and stepped in front of me. He put his hand on my shoulder, his voice firm. I came to say I support you. I've been thinking for the past few days about what Mom and Dad did. Not just to Daniel and Anna, but to you too. For 10 years, I knew they spoke ill of your wife behind your back. I knew they treated Daniel differently, but I didn't do anything. I just watched, telling myself it was family business. Shouldn't get involved. What Owen said truly surprised me. I thought he was neutral, but I was wrong. After a few seconds of silence and thought, Owen continued, his voice trembling. I'm sorry. I should have spoken up long ago. I should have protected you and Anna. I was wrong. I looked at my brother. This 45-year-old man has red eyes, and his shoulders are slightly shaking. I stood up, stepped forward to hug him. That night, for the first time, I truly felt grateful and loved my brother. 30 days passed. My parents still didn't pay me back. Not only that, they hired a lawyer to fight back. They declared the money was a gift from their son, not a loan. They opposed the restraining order, saying they had the right to see their grandchildren. The case was then taken to court. After a long day in court, after hearing all sides, the judge made their decision. About the restraining order, the court agreed to issue a restraining order against my parents. The term for this order is until both my children reach the age of 18. My parents aren't allowed to have direct contact with Harper and Daniel. They can't go near their school or house, and they can't contact them by phone or social media. Regarding the money, the court reviewed the evidence and determined that my parents must repay me $215,000, plus interest accrued over the years. At the same time, they have to pay additional costs related to this lawsuit. When the judge finished reading the verdict, Mom burst into tears. She screamed, "This isn't fair. We're their grandparents. You can't separate us from our grandchildren. This violates human rights." The judge looked at Mom coldly and replied, "You have the right to appeal if you disagree with the verdict. But I suggest you think about your behavior and why we're here today." After winning that day in court, we just walked past Mom without saying another word. It's been 2 years since that trial. My parents had to sell their house to pay the debt. According to Owen, they moved to a small apartment on the outskirts of town, living on Social Security and what little savings they had left. Relatives gradually found out. News about the DNA test results spread quickly. The whispers about Anna cheating disappeared. Instead, people started talking about my parents, about how they'd cruelly treated their grandson, about how they'd lost both grandchildren because of their own stubbornness and cruelty. Our life is better than ever. I found a new job a few months after the trial. Not a CEO position like before, but a stable job with a salary enough to live comfortably. Anna still does the work she loves. With the money my parents received back, we renovated our house and established savings funds for the kids. Harper is 14 now. She's tall, beautiful, and still protects her little brother like a lioness. Whenever someone asks about her grandparents, Harper shrugs and answers casually, "We don't have grandparents." She's not angry like before. She's learned to let go. Daniel is 12 now. The boy has overcome those old wounds with help from a therapist. Sometimes he still asks me why his grandparents hated him. I don't know how to explain to a child the senseless cruelty of adults. I can only hug him tight and say, "That wasn't your fault. You're the most wonderful kid I've ever known." Owen still keeps in touch with us. He did as he promised, kept his distance from our parents. Every month, he brings his family to our house for dinner. Harper and Daniel really love Uncle Owen and their cousins. That's our family now. Every evening, when the whole family sits together around the dinner table, I watch Anna laugh and talk with the kids. I watch Harper tease Daniel. I watch Daniel grin widely at some silly joke. In those moments, I know I made the right decision. Through this story, I have some advice for you. First, don't put up with things for too long, hoping they will change on their own. Staying silent about wrong behavior doesn't help people realize their mistakes. It just makes them think they have the right to continue. If you see something's not right, speak up early. The longer you wait, the deeper the damage, and the more complicated everything becomes to fix. Second, really listen to your partner. Sometimes people suffer in silence because they don't want to bother you. Don't just ask, "Are you okay?" and accept the answer, "I'm fine." Observe. Ask deeper. Create a safe space where they can express their thoughts and feelings about what's weighing on their minds. Finally, remember that your children are watching you all the time. They see when you endure. They know when you stand up. They learn how to treat others and how to let others treat them by watching you. Show them that protecting the people you love is the right thing to do, and no one has the right to hurt those we care about. When I told this story to some friends, they reacted very differently. Some supported my decision, saying I did the right thing. However, some people still disagreed with me. They said I was too weak, not worthy of being a man. They said that if they were me, they would have made my parents' house the brightest spot in the neighborhood on Christmas night with a match. What about you? After hearing this story, do you think I was too weak? Leave your thoughts in the comments below this story. And if this story touched your emotions, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, and share this story. Thanks for following this long story.